Hi, I'm Kathleen Webber. I'm the co-founder and CEO of LiveRem and really excited to be here today on our very first QuickBites webinar. So the concept behind QuickBites, been thinking about it for a little while, but basically is to create a space where we can share knowledge and learnings and insights on what it really takes to excel in business with a bit of an HR focus, because obviously that's what we love and specialize in. And we're keeping it really short and impactful with a 30-minute lunch and learn style webinar session that we're going to be hosting regularly, which is super exciting. So I hope you've grabbed something to eat and settled in because we've got a really exciting session lined up today. I'm delighted to welcome our very first guest, Gabrielle Cutfield from Emerging Engines. Welcome, Gabrielle.
Thank you very much. I'm slightly terrified to be first, but also very excited.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
Thanks.
It was an easy pick for me. Gabrielle and I met maybe a couple of months ago now, actually, at a cafe and really bonded over our shared desktop. What would you call it?
Chaos.
Yeah.
Chaos. Yeah.
And unread emails. But yeah, luckily we've got some pretty amazing organized people around us to make things happen. Cool. So today's topic is building high performance leadership teams, the role of strategic people planning in scaling businesses, which is a very formal title for something that is hopefully going to be quite a casual discussion. I'll quickly introduce Gabrielle and then she can introduce herself as well. But Gabrielle is the founder of Emerging Engines, which is an HR consultancy focused on maximizing your investment by building high-performing teams that can truly scale. Awesome. And she brings a wealth of experience from her roles as Chief People Officer and Chief of Staff, working across APAC, North America, the UK, and Europe. And according to her website, her mission is to demonstrate the simplicity and the significant return on investment that comes when you focus on building a high-performing team. Welcome to the very first webinar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I do have to say, I don't mean to railroad you, but we've actually changed our mission, having spent a week in Taupo with my team this week. So our new mission is to enable business growth through productivity through people. So that's what we're all about now, is really maximizing. It's really old school. It's not human capital, but you've got one shot at hiring a really strong team. So we're all about measuring the performance and the productivity of that team and making it kind of fun along the way.
Awesome. I love that. And I think that's like really in line with what we're here today. So hopefully you had that in mind when you were coming up with your new mission. Hey, should we jump in then? Do you want to just tell us a bit about Emerging Engines and what your approach is with people strategy and integrating data-driven decision making?
Yeah, sure. So as I say, I mean, our whole mission is around enabling growth through productivity through people, right? So what does that even mean? I think there's kind of two schools of thought around what a P&C function is. There is the like employee experience kind of side of things where you're making sure that people are really happy to come to work. You've got high engagement. We kind of hang out on the other side of the spectrum, and I get that's polarizing to some, but we are in the startup scale up space. And our belief is that until you've got a business that's like functioning and productive, you're not going to be able to offer a really lovely employee experience. And what we really tend to try and double down on with the clients is like, what can you offer these people? And a lot of that is to do with, we're in a high growth startup. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be creative. You're going to be sort of challenged every day, but isn't that great for your career development? Do you get health insurance? Probably not. So again, that's very much kind of where we play. Our kind of, I guess, point of difference is we always start with a really good kind of data proof point. So we come into the business, we align with like, what are your goals? Is it growth? Is it employment churn that's out of control, and what are we seeing there? But we always put some really key baseline processes in place where we can have a measure and then make some kind of goals with the executive team to, over time, see those data points change in a way that we want to align with the goals. So yeah, that's kind of our secret sauce, and so far it seems to be working.
Yeah, cool. So what kind of companies are you working with? You talk about startup and scale up, but for context, like what does that mean in your world?
Yeah. So I'm talking New Zealand, so we're not, but ours, we tend to sort of hang out within the whether it's 5 people and we kind of flex in and out as needed, or a lot of our clients are in that sort of Series B range with global teams, and they're sort of sitting around 65 FTE. So we come in a fully embedded model, full assist with HRBP, CPO style, with a talent bolt on, and then we also come in as a safe flex and sort of offer people advice and support as they need it.
Yeah, cool. And so do most of the companies, sorry, I'm going a little bit off. We had some like pre-arranged questions, but I'm really interested in this. Do you find that most of the companies when you come in have got some sort of baseline already, or are they really kind of just starting from scratch?
It's a total mixed bag. Like some have got um, fairly good processes, actually. It's just they're not doing anything with the data points at the back end,
Yeah.
and others have nothing. And people are like dying; they're breaking as a result of churn because no one's had a pay increase based on looking at a tool,
Yeah.
for example, or they haven't actually had a conversation with their manager about what good looks like and where can I go. So it's a massively mixed bag at the moment.
Yeah, cool. So on that kind of data piece, which is I guess the whole topic of today, but what in your mind, why is it crucial to have data and people planning, and how have you seen that in a real life example of where it's led to better decisions?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think like there's sort of I guess what I've seen in terms of like practices and PNC is you run these performance processes and these engagement scores and all the things, but everyone's like, oh, it's really hard to put metrics against PNC, so let's just not do that. In terms of examples where I've seen it, I'll start with something that wasn't so great that we sort of turned around was um, one of our clients who's like amazing business, invested a ton into PNC, lots of HR tech, great benefits, awesome culture, but the frequency of processes was like crippling the business, right, for the size and stage.
Yeah.
And I was sort of watching these processes, and they're like, cool, done, in the drawer. And I was like, well, what did you kind of learn from it? Did you know, like, where are we sitting performance wise? Do we have like a bell curve? Does
Yeah.
performance and engagement? I don't know. And so my kind of challenge to them was like, what is the value in this stuff? And so we've actually halved the volume of processes and made sure that on the back end of all those, we're pulling out really key data points to surface up to our executive team to say, hey, we don't need you to invest in all things. We just need you to invest in this one thing here that we're seeing as a real big problem for the business. And again, like I give you a good example of where we've been able to kind of come in and assess what's going on. I love when you go into a business and they've got these massively high engagement scores, and everyone's like, man, this is great. And they're all hanging out around the water cooler, but actually the performance of the business is like not good.
Yeah.
And so it's that sort of like low performance inertia, I like to call it.
Yeah.
And so we went, hey, look, we're going to have to, we're calling it weed the garden. We're going to have to weed the garden as we scale through this change process to get to high performance. We're good with churn. We're going to do some talent mapping, and we're going to track over time how people either rise up to the challenge or opt out, which they have. And
Mhm.
what do you know? We just hit our sales targets last quarter. So,
Yeah.
it's really like the work you can do when you actually lean into the data as a PNC function is like quite transformational. And that's what it excites me every day about what we do.
Yeah, awesome. I've got so many questions off that little piece. The very first thing that you said was some people have this view that you can't put metrics around P and C. What do you think that's about? And I guess the second part of that question is um, what are kind of like the key metrics that you would focus on? I know you touched on turnover, but equally sales and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
what do you think?
I think for me, I still get, sure everyone in this industry will agree. Just like marketing can be branded the coloring in department, like we are the tea and tissues department sometimes. And, sometimes I find that people are like, would you mind just ordering those flowers or doing the thing? And I'm like, whoa, 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 hang on a minute. So I think there's this kind of reputation that we have that we can't sit up at the top table and have commercial conversations. And so in order to kind of, I guess, really overcome those obstacles, you need a PNC leader who's going to front into this and actually turn up with a whole set of metrics and say, this is what we're about, and I'm going to hold my team accountable to this.
Yeah.
I don't see it very often, but like
Okay. Why do you
I
think that
haven't
is?
improved more.
Just like a lot of
Yeah,
teams
I mean,
working in that way, or
Yeah, I probably can't answer that question. I think, as I say, I think it's almost like a bit of a journey that I guess the discipline is on at the moment.
Yeah.
And so when I meet really operational PNC people, I get super excited because we start talking about all these like nerdy metrics rather than like, hey, what are your benefits packages like? That to me is not exciting. So yeah, I don't know. I can't answer the question. I think it's case by case, business by business and CEO by CEO, because I'm really lucky that I've got CEOs that really see the value in people,
Yeah.
and making those changes. And so, like, I get free reign to sit down and go, "This is what we're doing this quarter," and they back me, and it's epic. But if I have a CEO that is not going to do that, you're not going to be successful if you don't have the leadership support.
Do you think that's more common in that kind of startup scale up mentality of that founder CEO versus more corporatized CEO, or is that just a generalization?
It is a generalization, but I think they're just different, right? Like
Yeah.
the reason I love working with startup CEOs is because I always say like ordinary people don't do extraordinary things.
Yeah.
And so you've got these like people that are doing like super exciting, like earth shatteringly new things. They're probably not going to be leaning into like really courageous feedback conversations because they're very focused on growing their business. And
Yeah.
so if you can come in and like bridge that gap for them and build that relationship where you are their EQ coach, hey, they didn't land particularly well, you can't say that. It becomes this like really amazing superpower relationship. Um, you know, sometimes it doesn't land because they don't believe in it. And I've had that before. And so I guess on the flip side of that, you go into a large corporate organization, it's very much like this is your box. And, I would argue that there's potentially people that have got slightly more baked in views about certain things in those organizations. So yeah, it's different wherever you go.
Yeah. I know it's in my experience, you get myself included, you get founders who maybe haven't had heaps of experience managing big teams as well. And then all of a sudden you're scaling up and you have gone from like a couple of people that you know really well to, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 plus staff, and you're expected to kind of do all of that plus be the person who is like, driving the growth of the business. So I can,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think, and I see this a lot. When you're not comfortable having tough conversations, you avoid them. And then you get to like boiling point when you're like super frustrated and you just deliver some stuff in a way that does not make you proud.
yeah,
And so, my role in that is to make sure that that doesn't get to that boiling point and to really be pushing them to try and like extend themselves to have those conversations like earlier.
yeah. You touched on, going in and working with leadership teams and things like that. How does that journey of adoption work? Are most open to the idea of using, I don't know, data to drive change, or is it again varying levels of openness?
Look, I think my secret sauce there is like when you're joining a leadership team, you've got to get out of your PNC box. If you can't sit at there might be a people metric in that strategy plan or strategy, whatever it might be a NPS metric, but that's not going to drive business growth. Your ARR, your churn, your burn, all the good stuff. So if you're a PNC leader, you need to sit at the table and know what they're talking about to start, because those are the metrics that line you up as a leadership team.
Yeah,
It's not like, hey, I've got a deeply engaged team. Look at me. That's so wonderful. That's a leading indicator of your ability to hit those key metrics. So I think I definitely tend to take off my PNC hat when I'm sitting at those tables. Not that they don't care, but if you're sitting there banging away about PNC metrics and actually you've got burn going through the roof because you're spending too much money on technology, you're not going to look overly cool.
yeah, yeah. Do you reckon it changed? So your approach in terms of what metrics you measure, does that change depending on the scale of, sorry, the stage of where the startup's at? So, small 5-person team compared to 50 plus person scale up?
Yeah, yeah, it does. I think. I mean, you've still got the fundamentals in place, right? Are we happy? Are we high performing? Are we clear on what we're doing, and do we do it well?
Yeah,
Um, I think the difference is when you get to a slightly bigger team, you're also assessing potential, and you can actually create space for people to grow into these roles, and so actually like really registering when people are ready and pushing them into that space. Fundamentally, those things shouldn't change, but I think the way you think about them and the rigor around the processes is certainly different when you're in a bigger business, more data points, more exciting. But you get a nice kind of feel when you're in a smaller business as to where people are at.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, I was talking with someone yesterday actually who was saying, "Oh, I was employee 12 of this company and now there's 140 of us and someone walked in the door and I didn't know who they were." And it's like
Yeah.
that was a real moment for her of going, wow, we've like really grown, and that letting go of definitely guilty of this and like controlling it and needing to trust the people
Yeah.
in your team as well, but setting like what you're saying, setting those metrics that we're all agreed on and aligned to is really key.
Mm. Yeah, and I think what you find in those, in startup days is everyone's running around plugging dikes and having a great time, and it's hard, but it's fun.
Yeah.
You do get to a sort of a like an inflection point where that mentality, you can't sell and develop code and sort product. There does come a time where you need to separate the disciplines and get some leadership in there. And some people just naturally opt out of that stage. And I've seen founders trying to hold on to those people because they just feel so grateful and they love them so much, but they don't want accountability and they don't want to be in a box. And while I've learned the hard way, not don't put people in a box when but you've got to give them accountability, or else they will just run around creating havoc for the rest of the team.
Yeah.
And the kindest thing to do is just say, it's been real, but I think you need to go and be excellent elsewhere.
I was just about to say that one of my like mentors and people that I worked with in the past, it was the exact line she used. Time to seek
Was it?
excellence elsewhere.
Find excellence elsewhere. That's my my PASAG. Yeah.
Kind of love it.
Mm.
Um, so in terms of like the type of data that you look for when you're putting these processes and structures in terms of the companies you work with, how does that guide what tech and processes you use?
Yeah. I think the key thing, right, is when you're starting out, you've got very limited resource and a lot of stuff to do. And people are always super helpful when it comes to what I should be doing. So I get a lot of very helpful um, ideas from people around. Oh my gosh, you should do this leadership training. You should do this thing. Um, Fundamentally, you've got to focus on the things that are the most important. And for me, that's just getting like the fundamentals in place. Do we have a performance process that is, I tend to do 2 a year, one based on performance, one based on potential, and where am I
Yeah,
going? We do a bit of engagement surveys in the interim, and then it's really about, do people know what their jobs are they getting feedback, that kind of stuff. So that's like the bare minimum. And then in terms of assessing what's needed to support that, I've seen organizations just over invest in HR tech to start, without actually thinking about what is the need we're trying to that we're covering. And so I've actually pulled stuff out when I've gone in.
yeah,
And I think you've just got to really think about, you need something for your core processes. You may need an ATS if you're scaling up. You totally need live REM because that thing takes like a quarter. No, genuinely, I'm very excited about it. But it's just a
you would
matter
have
of
got paid
really
to say that. Let's be clear.
yeah, yeah, that's the plug. No, but it's just a matter of really remembering that you cannot replace actual people processes by over investing in technology. You still have to do the stuff and have the conversations. But in terms of what I think about when I'm putting these tech products in is, can I extract data in the back end that is meaningful to the business? So
Yeah,
for example, I do 2 performance reviews, or I do 4 over 2 years. I'm looking at the data points for each of those to see, for example, one we did recently, really low performance, but really high desire to retain, which says, I'm terrified of having hard conversations and I'm terrified of recruiting. So we're like, how can we just like shift that back slightly? And we have, which is cool. So
yeah.
as I say, it's all about what you can get out of the back end.
Yeah, I love that you've made that analysis by seeing those two like somewhat disparate data points, but the kind of synergy between them going, oh, well, that's causing that.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're looking, which we have is within LiveRem, is turnover, which you touched on, but also kind of now looking at how we can drill down to that further and going, well, the turnover, is it, say your turnover is, I don't know, 10%, but is that if that's across the whole board, where's that coming from? Is it one team and are they leaving in the
Mm.
first 3 months or 6 months, or are they lasting longer? And like really drilling down to see, well, have we got a problem in a specific area of the business, to try
Yeah.
and use that to kind of deduce what your issues may be.
Absolutely. And as I say, while I don't hang my hat on churn as our metric, it is one of the
Yeah,
driving factors in what you're looking at. And I totally agree, because you cannot diminish the importance of good leadership.
Yeah.
because you will lose your good people. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like obviously there's a natural churn that you want as well because you want change and ideas and freshness. But it's yeah, I think can't remember the quote I heard, but someone said if they have churn within the first 12 months, they want their money back, and I get that because it takes a while for people to get up to speed. But you're also as a employer, you're investing in your staff as well and wanting to make sure that
mm.
you get something out of it.
Oh, it's super. I mean, we just did a piece of analysis for a client because we were looking at the churn going, and we sort of over a quarter quantified that it's cost them at least probably 670,000 plus,
Yeah,
and that's in investment and salary, and and I'm not even talking like disruption to business, re-recruiting. When you put that metric in front of a CEO, it's pretty hard to ignore that you need to have
yeah,
a hard conversation with your manager.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well. A few people that I've met with have said, particularly in like the REM specific roles, so that might be like a REM consultant or rewards consultant, and they're saying, I spend all this time gathering data and then I take it to my leadership team and they're like, oh, it's 6 or 12 months out of date, and they just basically get laughed out of the room. And
Mm.
that's another thing as well, around like having that up to date data and the value of that.
Totally. And it's just, and what I've found really fascinating as well is watching the trends over time. So, we all know developer salaries just post COVID went like all kinds of crazy. I can't remember the percent, but it brings me great joy to watch them coming back to a place where they are manageable and we're not clambering over each other to hire. And so, yeah, I find that those trends over time really interesting, depending on skill sets and needs
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah. Hey, what are the must-watch metrics then for CEOs
For the
that you would say?
for CEOs. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, from a whole business perspective, right? They
yeah,
are growth, MRR, ARR, churn, burn, how happy are your customers, all that good stuff. And I think, look, from a people perspective, for me, it's got to be a combination of different data points that all map to high performance.
yeah,
What a CEO wants to see. If John Smith is not pumped to come into work every morning and he's a bit grumpy because the water cooler changed, the CEO is not going to care. If you're losing people out the bottom end because you've got a terrible leadership team that are not giving people feedback, that's when the CEO needs to kind of be aware. So I think it's your obligation as a PNC leader is to surface up the appropriate metrics at the time, and not keep not keep one metric top of mind all the time because they will shift as you go through your people and growth journey.
yeah. I'm definitely already seeing that, and we're only 6 months in, but in that kind of phase of really still starting to put in some structure. And yeah, we probably need you to come and help us at some point soon, actually.
Oh, give me a call.
Yeah, figuring it out.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So, what's next? Future of data and people strategy. What do you reckon's coming next?
I would like to continue to see the PNC function just continue to become a more commercial partner. Like, I don't want, I'm sick of hearing CEOs say that's a cost center because it's a productivity powerhouse. Like, if you get it right and you're like, hey, actually, we could relook at, the way we're doing this, or we could look at this team. Like, you can make your money back if you hire an awesome PNC function really quickly. So I'd
Yeah,
like to see that progressing over time. I think for me as well, I'm super excited about AI. Like, there's so much that we do that we can expedite in terms of like, you know, and when they're not going to take our jobs. We're good. Because you still need to coach and sort of circumnavigate difficult processes. But like, I'm starting a project this quarter with my team to look at what we can do from an AI perspective. So just like, we have our kind of zone of genius, right? When we're talking to our clients, my zone of genius is not doing restructure letters. So surely there's got to be a way that we can expedite that so I can spend more time with coaching my clients. So I guess for us, those are the two areas that we are really looking at. I think, this is more of a me thing, but my customer satisfaction or client satisfaction in terms of like, are we doing what we said we would, is super important. And so one of my key measures I'm putting in place is, are you getting productivity through people from us,
yeah,
and how are we measuring that? And so just being really very timely with this, but are we measuring data points to demonstrate our worth?
yeah, yeah. And so, and on that, like, what kind of data points would you look at, or is it just dependent on the company?
It is dependent, but fundamentally for me is, it starts with the growth metric. It's
Yeah,
got to start there.
yeah,
And then we're sort of laddering that down to then looking across and saying, what is the performance um, ratings we're getting across the business?
yeah,
Are we high performing? What's our bell curve look like? And then on the back of that is, and how happy are our people to be there and high performing? Because if you've got, as I say, if you've got a disparity between one of those two metrics, you're kind of in trouble. And if you've got the two right, you've probably got a highly engaged high performance culture, which is awesome. So yeah, there are sort of leading indicators around that. We've got, if you want to talk about talent acquisition, there's like multitudes of things you can be looking at. But if you bake it all back, if you can ladder your P&C metrics into the wider CEO metrics, and demonstrate how those things will equal that, then you're in good stead.
yeah, awesome. Hey, we have got some time, so if anybody here has any questions, I think you can just type it into the chat. So I'll give you a second to do that. But just while we see if anything pops up, Gabrielle, is there anything else you wanted to share? Any kind of learnings? Any things that's gone terrible that people could maybe take away and go, let's not do that?
I think like there's two things, right? Is people processes are people, they're not widgets. I always say this, like my team, like, oh my gosh, I did this thing wrong. You can walk stuff back. Like if there's no reason to say you have to get it right perfect first time. And I think as long as you're really like vulnerable and clinical about that with the business, like, hey, I'm going to try some stuff. It's going to be weird and clunky. Go with me on this journey. Then it lands reasonably well. And the other thing is, be creative with your processes. Like, you do not need to be confined to some you know, amazing HRA system, or just like do a Google form and see how it lands before you overinvest in the technology.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just have a bit of fun with the creativity with it.
Yeah, I think like I'm really guilty of that. I see something shiny, like, oh, I need to fix this problem. So quick Google, tell me what I should get, and then it'll pop up with all these things, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's
See, my
just
team's like, let's get this. I'm like, no, do it yourself. And they're like, oh, that's so boring. But it is just, if you try and fail a few times, building it yourself, then you know exactly what you're solving for.
yeah,
And so you can go out and buy a tool that really works for what you need.
yeah. Awesome. All right. I don't think we haven't got any other questions at this stage, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you for your time today, and thanks to everyone for joining us. I just thought before I go, I'd do a really quick plug for LiveRem. We, if you don't know us, are a real-time salary and HR benchmarking tool that helps reduce your turnover and optimize your salary spend by making sure you're paying people fairly and equitably. We also have a free gender pay gap reporting tool that any company can access. So basically everything that Gabrielle's just talked about around like data and metrics, particularly around retention and understanding things like sick leave and all these different interesting HR insights, you can get with using us. So if you're keen to have a chat, just flick me a message. I think there's going to be the recording of the webinar sent out after this today, and we are going to announce our next webinar for next month very soon. So keep an eye out, and yeah, we'd love to have you all back. So thanks so much for your time, Gabrielle.
Pleasure. It was lovely to chat to you.
Awesome. Have a good afternoon.